3. Ben Harrow's Hanscom Takes a drink. If, on the night of May 28, 1985, you had wanted to find the Man Time magazine he called. No. You had wanted to find the Man Time magazine had called perhaps the most promising young architect in America, urban. Alright, let's go again. If on that night on May 28, 1985, you had wanted to find the man Time magazine had called perhaps the most promising young architect in America, parenthesis, quote, urban energy conservation and the Young Turks, end quote, time October 15, 1984, close parenthesis, you will have had to drive west of the Omaha on Interstate 80 to do it. You have taken the Swell Dome exit and the Highway 81 to downtown's Sweetholm, of which there isn't much. Then there you'll turn off on Highway 92 at Bucky's. I had eat 'em up. Parenthesis quote chicken fried steak or special. Oh damn it! Go again. You have taken a Sweetholm exit and then Highway 81 to downtown Sweetholm, of which there isn't much. Period. Then you turn off on Highway 92 at Bucky's. I had eat 'em up. Parenthesis quote chicken fried steak or specialty, end quote parenthesis. And once out in the country again, you hang a right on Highway 63, which runs straight as a string through the desert, the desert little town of Gatlin, and finally into Hemingford Home. Downtown Hemingford Home made downtown Sweetholm look like New York City. The business district consisted of 8 buildings, 5 on one side and 3 on the other. There was a clean-cut barber shop, propped in the window of yellowing hand leather. Propped in the window a yellowing hand leather sign, fully 15 years old, read, "If you are a hippie, get your haircut somewhere else." The second run movie house. The Five and Dime. What? Let's go again. Downtown Hemingford Home made downtown Sweetholm look like New York City. The business district consisted of 8 buildings, 5 on one side of the street and 5 on one side and 3 on the other side. 5 on one side and 3 on the other. There was a clean-cut barber shop, propped in a window a yellowing hand leather sign, fully 15 years old, read, "If you're a hippie, get your haircut somewhere else." The second run movie house, The Five and Dime. There was a bunch of Nebraska's Homeowners Bank, a 76 gas station, a Rexall drug, and the National Farmstead and Hardware Supply, which was the only business in town which looked halfway prosperous. And near the end of the mine drag, set off a little way from the other buildings, like a pariah and resting on the edge of the big empty, you had your basic roadhouse. The red wheel, if you had gotten that far. The red wheel, if you had gotten that far, you will will have seen it in the porthole cold, dirt parking lot and engine 1968 Cadillac convertible with double CB Antmans on the back, and the vanity plate on the front read simply Ben's Caddy. And inside, walking toward the bar, you will have found your man, lanky, sunburned, dressed in a chambray shirt, faded jeans, and a pair of scuffed engineer boots. There were faint squint lines around the corner of his eyes, but nowhere else. He looked perhaps 10 years younger than his actual age, which was 38. "Hello, Mr. Hanscom," Wrigley said, putting a paper napkin on the bar as Ben sat down. "Hello, Mr. Hanscom," Wrigley said, putting a paper napkin on the bar as Ben sat down. Wrigley sounded a brief surprise, and he was. He had never seen Hanscom in the wheel on a weeknight before. He had never seen Hanscom in the wheel on a weeknight before. Okay. He came in regularly, even Friday night for 2 years, and every Saturday night for 4 or 5. He always asked after Wrigley's Three Boys. He always left the same $5 tip under his beer stain when he took off. He took off. In terms of both professional conversation and personal regard, he was far and away Wrigley's favorite customer. The $10 a week, and the 50 left under the stain far more. Okay, yes, okay. Let's go again. In terms of professional conversation, in terms of both professional conversation and personal regard, he was far and away Ricky's favorite customer. The $10 a week and the 50 left under the steam far at each Christmas time over the last 5 years was fine enough. But the man's company was worth far more. Okay, that wasn't what I thought it said. Worldwide company was always a rarity, but in a honky tonk like this, there were talks away, where talk always came cheap. It was scarcer than hen's teeth. Although Hanscom's roots were in England, and he had gone to college in California, Although Hankins' roots were in New England and he had gone to college in California, there was more than a touch of extravagant Texan about there was more than a touch of an extravagant Texan about him. Wrigley counted on Ben's Hanscom Friday Saturday night stops because he had learned over the years that he could count on them. Mr. Hanscom might be building a skyscraper in New York, where he already had 3 of the most talked about buildings in the city, a new art gallery in Redondo Beach, or a business building in Sand Lake City. But come Friday night, the door leading to the parking lot will open sometime between 8 o'clock and 9:30, and in he will stroll, as if he lived no further than the other side of town and had decided to drop in because there was nothing good on TV. He had his own Learjet and a private landing strip on his farm in Jenkins. 2 years ago he had been in London, first designing and then overseeing the construction of the new BBC Communications Centre, a building that was still hotly debated pro and con in the British press. The Guardian, quote, "Perhaps the most beautiful building to be constructed in London over the last 20 years," end quote. The Mirror, quote, "Other than the face of my mother-in-law after pub crawl, the ugliest thing I have ever seen," end quote. When Mr. Hanscom took that job, Ricky Lee had thought, "Well, I'll see him again. I'll see him again sometime, or maybe he'll just forget all about us." And indeed, the Friday night after Ben Hanscom left for England had come and gone with no signs of him. Again, and indeed, the Friday night after Ben Hanscom left for England had come and gone with no signs of him, although Ricky Lee found himself looking up quickly every time the door opened between 8 and 9:30. Well, I'll see him again sometime, maybe. Sometime turned out to be next night. The door had opened at 9:15 and in he had ambled, wearing jeans and a Go Obama t-shirt and his old engineering boots, looking like he'd come from no farther away than Crosstown. And when Ricky Lee cried almost joyfully, "Hey, Mr. Hanscom! Christ, what are you doing here?" Mr. Hanscom had looked mildly surprised, as if there was nothing in the least unusual about his being here. Nor had that been a one-shot. He had showed up every Saturday during the 2 years course of his active involvement in the BBC job. He left London each Saturday morning 11 a.m. and on the Concorde he told a fascinated Ricky Lee and arrived at Kennedy in New York at 10:15 a.m. 45 minutes before he left London, at least by the clock. God, it's like time travel, ain't it?" An impressed Ricky Lee had said. A limousine was standing by to take him over to Teterboro Airport, over to Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. A trip would usually took no more than an hour on Saturday morning. He could be in the cockpit of his Lear before noon with no trouble at all, and touching down in Jenkins by 2:30. If you head west fast enough," he told Ricky, the day just seems to go on forever. He will take a 2-hour nap, spend an hour with his foreman and half hour with his secretary. He will eat supper and then come on over to the Red Wheel for an hour and a half or so. He always came in alone, and he always sat at the bar, and he always left the way he had come in. Although God knew there were plenty of women in this part of Nebraska who wouldn't have been happy to screw the socks off him. God knew there were plenty of women in this part of Nebraska who would have been happy to screw the socks off him. But at the farm he would catch 6 hours of sleep, and then the whole process would reverse itself. Ricky had never had a customer who failed to be impressed with this story. "Maybe he's gay," a woman had told him once. Ricky Lee glanced at her briefly, taking in the carefully styled hair, the carefully tailored clothes, which undoubtedly had designer's labels. the diamond chips at her ears, the look in her face, the diamond chips at her ears, the look in her eyes. I knew that she was from somewhere back east, probably New York. Out here on a brief daddy visit, out here on a brief daddy visit, or to a relative, or maybe an old school chum, and couldn't wait to get out again. No, he had replied. Mr. Hanscom ain't no easy. She had taken a pack of Doral cigarettes from her purse and held one between her red glistening lips until he lit it for her. How do you know? She had asked, smiling a little. I just do. I just do, he said. And he did. He thought of saying to her, I think he's the most god awful lonely man I ever met in my life. But he wasn't going to say any such thing to this New York woman who was looking at him like he was some new and amusing type of life. Tonight, Mr. Hanlon looked a little pale, a little distracted. Hello, Wrigley, he said, sitting down, and then fell to studying his hand. Wrigley knew he was slated to spend the next 6 or 8 months in Colorado. Wrigley knew he was slated to spend the next 6 or 8 months in Colorado Springs, overseeing the start of the Mountain States Cultural Center, a sprawling 6-building complex which will be cut into the side of a mountain. When it's done, people are going to say it looks like a giant kid left his toy blocks all over the flight of stairs. What? Wrigley knew he was slated to spend the next 6 or 8 months in Colorado Springs, overseeing the start of the Mountain States Cultural Center, a sprawling 6-building complex which will be cut into the side of a mountain. When it's done, people are going to say it looks like a giant kid left his toy blocks all over the flight of stairs. All over a flight of stairs. Ben had told Ricky Lee some will anyway, and they'll be at least half right, but I think it's going to work. It's the biggest thing I've ever tried, and putting up. It's going to be scary as hell, but I think it's going to work. Wrigley supposed it was possible that Mr. Hanscom had a little touch of stage fright. Nothing surprising about that, and nothing wrong about it, either. When you got big enough to be noticed, you got big enough to come gunning for. Or maybe he just had a touch of the bug. There was a hell of a lively one going around. Ricky Lee got a beer stain. Ricky Lee got a beer stain from the back bar and reached for the Olympia top. Don't do that, Wrigley. Wrigley turned back, surprised, and when Ben Hanscom looked up from his hands, he was suddenly frightened because Mr. Hanscom didn't look like he had stage fright or the virus that was going around or anything like that. He looked like he had just taken a terrible blow and he was still trying to understand whatever it was that had hit him. Someone died. He ain't married, but every man's got a family. And someone in his someone in his should be the dust. That's what happened. Just as sure as she rolls downhill from a privy. Someone dropped a quarter. Someone dropped a quarter in the box, and Barbara Mandrell started to sing about a drunk man and a lonely woman. You okay, Mr. Hanscom? Then Hanscom looked at Wrigley out of eyes that suddenly looked 10, no 20 years older than the rest of his face, and Wrigley was astonished to observe Mr. Hanscom's hair was graying. He had never noticed any gray in his hair before. Hanscom smiled. The smile was ghastly, horrible. It was like watching a corpse smile. I don't think I am, Wrigley. No, sir, not tonight, not at all. Wrigley set the stain down and walked back over to where Hanscom sat. The bar was as empty as a Monday night bar far outside of football season can get. What? Wrigley set the stain down and walked back over to where Hanscom sat. The bar was as empty as a Monday night bar far outside of football season can get. There were fewer than 20 paying customers in the place, and he was sitting by the door into the kitchen, playing cribbage with the short order cook. Bad news, Mr. Hanscom. Bad news. Bad news, that's right, bad news from home. He looked at Ricky. He looked through Ricky Lee. I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Hanscom. Thank you, Wrigley. He fell silent, and Wrigley was about to ask him if there was anything he could do when Hanscom said, What's your bar whiskey, Wrigley? For everyone else in this dump, it's Four Roses, Wrigley said. But for you, I think it's Wild Turkey. Hanscom smiled a little at that. That's good of you, Wrigley. I think you better grab that stain after all. What you do is fill it up with Wild Turkey. Fill it? Wrigley asked, frankly astonished. Christ, I have to roll you out of here, or call an ambulance, he thought. Not tonight, Hanscom said. I don't think so. Wrigley looked carefully into Mr. Hanscom's eyes to see if he could possibly be joking, and it took less than a second to see that he wasn't. So he got the stain from the back bar and the bottle of Wild Turkey from one of the shelves below. The neck of the bottle chattered against the rim of the stain as he began to pour. He watched the whiskey gurgle out, fascinated in spite of himself. Wrigley decided it was more than just a touch of the Texan that Mr. Hanscom had in him. This had to be the biggest goddamn shot of whiskey he ever had poured or ever will pour in his life. Call an ambulance, my ass. He drinks this baby, and I'm be calling Parker and Waters in the sweat home for the funeral hag. Nevertheless, he thought it back. Nevertheless, he brought it back and set it down in the front of Hanscom. Front of Hanscom. Nevertheless, he brought it back and set it down in front of Hanscom. Wrigley's father had once told him that if a man was in his right mind, you brought him what he paid for. But it piece off, be it piece or poison. Okay, again. Nevertheless, he brought it back and sat down in front of Hanscom. Wrigley's father had once told him that if a man was in his right mind, you brought him what he paid for, be it peace or poison. Wrigley didn't know if that was good advice or bad, but he knew that if you tended bar for a living, it went a fair piece forward. It went a fair piece towards saving you. It went a fair piece towards saving you from. Okay, it went a fair piece from saving you from being chopped into gator bait by your own conscience. Okay. Hanscom looked at the monster drink thoughtfully for a moment and then asked, "What do I owe you for a shot like that, Wrigley?" Wrigley shook his head slowly, eyes still on the skinful of whiskey, not waiting to look up and meet those sogged staring eyes. "No," he said, "this one is on the house." Hanscom looked at the monster drink okay. Hanscom smiled again, this time more naturally. "Why, I thank you, Wrigley. Now I'm going to show you something I learned about in Peru, 1978. I was working with a guy named Frank Billings, understudying with him. I guess you'd say Frank Billings was the best damned architect in the world, I think. He got a fever and the doctor injected about a billion different antibiotics into him, and not a single one of them touched it. He burned for 2 weeks and then died. And then he died. I am going to show you I learned from the Indians who worked on the project. The local popsicle is pretty potent. You take a slug and you think it's going down pretty well, pretty mellow, no problem. And then all at once it's like someone lit a blowtorch in your mouth and aim it down your throat. But the Indians drink it like Coca-Cola, and I rarely saw one drunk. I never saw one of them hungover. Never had to suck. Never had the sack to try their way myself. But I think I give it a go tonight. Bring me some of those lemon wedges there. Minute. A long more for this part. Right. Okay, not that much. About okay. Wrigley brought him four and laid them out nearly on a fresh napkin next to a stain of whiskey. Ascon picked one of them up, tilted his head back like a man about to administer 8 drops to himself, and then began to squeeze raw lemon juice into his right nostril. "Holy Jesus!" Wrigley cried, horrified. Hanscom's throat worked. His face flushed. And then Wrigley saw tears running down the flat planes of his face toward his ears. Now the spinners were on the jug, singing about the rumble band man. Oh Lord, I should Don't know how much of this I can stand, Spinner sang. Hanscom groped blindly on the bar, found another slice of lemon, and squeezed the juice into his other nostril. And you're gonna fucking kill yourself, Wrigley whispered. Hanscom tossed both of the wrung out lemon wedge onto the bar. His eyes were fiery red and he was breathing in hitching, wincing gasps. Clear lemon juice dripped from both of his nostrils and trickled down to the corners of his mouth. He groped for the stain. Raised it, and drank a third of it frozen. A third of it. Frozen Wrigley watched his Adam's apple go up and down. Hanscom set the stain aside, shuddered twice, then nodded. He looked at Wrigley and smiled a little. His eyes were no longer red. Works about like they say it did. You are so fucking concerned about your nose that you never feel what's going on down your throat at all. You're crazy, Mr. Hanscom, Wrigley said. You bet your fur, Mr. Hanscom said. You remember that one, Wrigley? We used to say that when we were kids. You bet your fur. Did I ever told you I used to be fat? No, sir, you never did, Wrigley whispered. He was now convinced that Mr. Hanscom had received some intelligence so dreadful that the man really had gone crazy, or at least taken temporary leave of his senses. I was a regular butterball, never played baseball or basketball, always got caught first when we played tag, couldn't keep out of my own way. I was fat all night, and there were these fellows in my hometown, who used to take after me pretty regularly. There was a fellow named Reginald Higgins. Only everyone called him Belch, a kid named Victor Christ, a few other guys, but the real brains of the combination was a fellow named Henry Bowers. If there has ever been a genuinely able kid strutting across the skin of the world, Wrigley, Henry Bowers was that kid. I wasn't the only kid he used to take after. My problem was I couldn't run as fast as some of the others. Hanscom unbuttoned his shirt and opened it. Hanscom unbuttoned his shirt and opened it. Leaning forward, Wrigley saw a funny, twisted scar of Mr. Hanscom's stomach just above his navel, puckered, white, and old. It was leather, he saw. Someone had carved the letter H into the man's stomach, probably long before Mr. Hanscom had been a man. Henry Bowers did that to me about a thousand years ago. I'm lucky I'm not wearing his whole damn name down there. Mr. Hanscom took the other two lemon slices, one of each hand, tilted his head back, and took them like nose drops. He shuddered rackingly, put them aside, and took two big swallows from the stain. From the stain. He shuddered again, took another gulp, and then groped for the padded edge of the bar with his eyes closed. For a moment he held on like a man on a sailboat clanging on the rail for support in a heavy sea. What? For a moment he held on like a man on a sailboat clinging. What? Again. He shuddered rockingly, put them aside, and took two big swallows of the stain. He shuddered again, took another gulp, and then groped for the paddle, the edge of the bar with his eyes closed. For a moment he held on like a man on a sailboat clinging to the rail for support in a heavy sea. Then he opened his eyes again and smiled wriggly. "I could ride this boat all night," he said. "Mr. Hanscom, I wish you wouldn't do that anymore," Wrigley said nervously. Annie came over to the waitress's stand with her tray. Annie came over to the waitress's stand with her tray and called for a couple of Millers. Wrigley drew them and took them down to her. His legs were rubbery. "Is Mr. Hanscom all right, Wrigley?" Annie asked. She was looking past Wrigley, and he turned to follow her gaze. Mr. Hanscom was leaning over the bar, carefully picking lemon slices out of the caddy where Wrigley kept the drink garnishes. "I don't know," he said. "I don't think so." "Well, get your thumb out of your ass and do something about it." Annie was, like most other women, partial to Ben Hanscom. I don't know. My daddy will always say that if a man is in his right mind, your daddy didn't have the brains God gave a gopher." And he said, "Never mind your daddy. You got to put a stop to that, Wrigley. He's going to kill himself." Thus given his marching orders, Wrigley went back down to where Ben Hanscom sat. "Mr. Hanscom, I really think you had an..." Hanscom tilted his head back, squeezed, actually sniffed the lemon juice back this time, as if it were cocaine. He gulped whiskey as if it were water. He looked at Wrigley solemnly. "Big Bang, I saw the whole gang dancing on my living room rug," he said, and then laughed. There was maybe 2 inches of whiskey left in the stain. "That is enough," Wrigley said, and reached for the stain. Hanscom moved it gently out of his reach. "Damage has been done, Wrigley," he said. "The damage has been done, boy." "Mr. Hanscom, please." "I've got something for you kids, Wrigley." Damn if I didn't almost forget. He was wearing a faded denim vest, and now he reached something out of one of his pockets. Wrigley heard a mute clink. My dad died when I was 4, Hanscom said. There was no slur at all in his voice. Left us a bunch of debts instead. "I want your kiddos to have them, Wrigley." He put 3 cartwheel silver dollars on the bar, where they gleamed under the soft lights. Wrigley coughed his breath. "Mr. Hanscom, that's very kind, but I couldn't. There used to be 4, but I gave one of them to Stuttering Bill and the others. Bill Denbrough, that was his real name. Stuttering Bill's just what we used to call him. Just a thing we used to say, like, you bet your fur. He was one of the best friends I ever had. I did have a few. You know, even a fat kid like me had a few. Southern Bill's a writer now." Wrigley barely heard him. He was looking at the car with fascinated. 1921, 1923, 1924. God knew, God knew what they were worth now, just in terms of the pure silver they contained. I couldn't, he said again. But I insist, Mr. Hancock. Mr. Hancock took hold of the stain and drained it. He should have been flat on his keister, but his eyes never left Wrigley's. Those eyes were watery and very bloodshot, but Ricky Lee would have sworn on a stack of Bibles that they were also the eyes of a sober man. You are scaring me a little, Mr. Hanscom. Ricky Lee said. 2 years ago, Gresham Arnold, a rundum of some local repute, had come into Red Wheel with a roll of quarters in his hand and $20 bills, and a $20 bill stuck and a $20 bill stuck into the band of his hat. He handed the roll to Annie with instructions to feed the quarters into the jukebox by 4. He put the 20 of the bar. He put the 20 on the bar and instructed Wrigley to set up drinks for the house. This Gresham Arnold had long ago been a star basketball player for Hermingford Rams, leading them to the first and most likely last high school team championship in 19 period. Damn it. In 1961, that had been. Okay, in 1961 that had been. An almost unlimited future seemed to lie ahead of the young man, but he had flunked out of the LSU his first semester, a victim of drink, drugs, and all-night parties. He came home, cracked up the yellow convertible his folks had given him as a graduation present, and got a job as head salesman in his daddy's John Deere dealership. 5 years passed, his father could not bear to fire him, and so he finally sold the dealership and retired to Arizona. A man haunted and made old before his time by the inexplicable and apparently irreversible degeneration of his son. While the dealership still belonged to his daddy, and he was at least pretending to work, Arnold had made some effort to keep the booze at arm's length. Afterwards, it got him completely. He could get mean, but he had been just as sweet as a Horbound candy. But he had been just as sweet as Horbound candy the night he brought in the quarters and set up drinks for the house. And everyone had thanked him kindly. And Annie kept playing Moe Bandy songs because Gresham Arnold liked all malt brandy. He sat there at the bar on the very stool where Mr. Hanscom was sitting now. Wrigley realized it with steadily deepening unease, and drank 3 of 4 bourbons and bitters, and sang along with the juke, and caused no trouble, and went home when Wrigley closed the wheel up, and hanged himself with his belt in an upstairs closet. Gresham Arnold's eyes that might have looked a little like Ben Hanscom's eyes looked right now. Okay. Scaring you a bit, am I? Hanscom asked. His eyes never leaving Wrigley's. He pushed the stain away and then folded his hands neatly in front of those 3 silver cartwheels. I probably am, but you are not as scared as I am. Wrigley, pray to Jesus. You never are. Ah, mierda. Well, that's the mother, Wrigley asked. Maybe. He wet his lips. Maybe I can give you a help. The mother? Ben Hanscom laughed. Why, not too much. I had a call from an old friend tonight. Guy named guy named Mike Hanlon. I've forgotten all about him, Wrigley. But that didn't scare me much. But that didn't scare me much. After all, I was just a kid when I knew him. And kids forget things, don't they? Sure they do. You bet you're four. You bet you're four. What scared me was getting about halfway over here and realizing that it wasn't just Mike I'd forgotten about. I'd forgotten everything about being a kid. Wrigley only looked at him. He had no idea what Mr. Hanscom was talking about, but the man was scared, alright. No question about it. No question about that. It sat funny on Ben Hanscom, but it was real. I mean, I'd forgotten all about it, he said, and rubbed his knuckles lightly on the bar for emphasis. Did you ever hear, Wrigley, of having an amnesia so complete you didn't even know you had amnesia? Wrigley shook his head. Me either. But there I was, tooling along in the caddy tonight, and all of a sudden it hit me. I remember my Hanlon, but only because he called me on the phone. I remember the ride, but only because that was where he was calling from. The ride? But that was all. It hit me that I hadn't even thought about being a kid since I don't even know when. But that was all. It hit me that I hadn't even thought about being a kid since I don't even know when. And then, just like that, it all started to float back in, like what we did with the $4 silver. What did you do with it, Mr. Hanscom? Hanscom looked at his watch, and suddenly slipped down from his stool. He staggered a bit. The slightest bit. That was all. Can't let the time get away from me, he said. I'm flying tonight. Wrigley looked instantly alarmed and Hanscom laughed. Flying but not driving a plane. Not this time. United Airlines, Wrigley. Oh. He supposed his relief showed on his face, but he didn't care. Where are you going? Hanscom's shirt was still open. He looked thoughtfully down at the puckered white lines of the old scar on his belly and then began to button the shirt over it. Thought I told you that, Wrigley. Home. I'm going home. Give those cartwheels to your kids. He started towards the door, and something about the way he walked, even the way he hitched at the side of his pants, terrified Wrigley. The resemblance to the late and most unlamented Gresham Arnold, and mostly unlamented Gresham Arnold was. The resemblance to the late and mostly unlamented Gresham Arnold was suddenly so acute that it was nearly like seeing a ghost. Mr. Hanscom, he cried in alarm. Hanscom turned back, and Wrigley stepped quickly backward. His ass hit the back bar and glassware. Glassware gossiped briefly as the bottles knocked together. He stepped back because he was suddenly convinced that Ben Hanscom was dead. Yes, Ben Hanscom was lying dead someplace. In a ditch, or an attic, or possibly in a closet. With a belt noosed around his neck and the toes of his $400 cowboy's boots dangling an inch or two above the floor. And this thing standing near the jug and staring back at him was a ghost. For a moment, just a moment, but it was plenty long enough to cover his working heart with a rim of ice. He was convinced he could see tables and chairs right through the man. What is it, Wrigley? Nothing. Then Hanscom looked at Wrigley from eyes which had dark purple crescent beneath them. His cheeks burned with liquor. His nose looked red and sore. Nothing, Wrigley whispered again. Nothing, Wrigley whispered again. But he couldn't take his eyes from that face, the face of a man who has died deep in sin and now stands hard by Hell's smoking side door. I was fat and we were poor, Ben Hanscom said. I remember that now, and I remember that either a girl named Beverly or a soldering Bill saved my life with a silver dollar. I'm scared, almost I am scared, almost insane by whatever else I may remember before tonight's over. But how scared I am doesn't matter because it's going to come anyway. It's all there. Like a great big bubble that's been growing in my mind. But I'm going because all I ever gotten and all I have now is somehow due to what we did then. And you pay for what you get in this world. Maybe. That's why God made us kids first and built us close to the ground, because He knows you got to fall down a lot and bleed a lot before you learn that one simple lesson. You pay for what you get, you own what you pay for. And sooner or later, whatever you own comes back home to you. You're gonna be back this weekend, though, ain't you? You're gonna be back this weekend, though, ain't you? Wrigley asked through numbered lips. In his increasing distress, this was all he could find to hold on to. You're gonna be back this weekend, just like always, ain't you? I don't know. I don't know, Mr. Hanscom said, and smiled a terrible smile. I'm going a little farther than London this time, Wrigley. Mr. Hanscom! Exclamation point. Exclamation mark. You give those cartwheels to your kids. He repeated and slipped out into the night. What the blue hell? Annie asked. But Wrigley ignored her. He flipped out the bar partition and ran over to one of the windows which looked out on the parking lot. He saw the headlights of Mr. Hanscom's caddy come on. Heard the engine rev. It pulled out of the dirt lot, kicking up a rooster tail of dust behind it. The tail lights winded away to red points down Highway 63, and the Nebraska night wind began to pull the hanging dust apart. He took on a boxcar He took on a boxcar full of booze, and you let him get in that big car of his and drive away. And he said, "Way to go, Wrigley." "Never mind, he's going to kill himself." And although this had been Wrigley's own thought less than 5 minutes ago, he turned to her when the taillights winked out of the side of the and shook his head. "I don't think so. Although the way he looked tonight, it might be better for him if he did." What did he say to you?" He shook his head. He was all confused in his mind, and the sum total of it seemed to mean nothing. "It doesn't matter, but I don't think we're ever going to see that old boy again." Oh man. Alright, that's it for now. Maybe later today, another part. See ya! Like, oh, here.